Hey everyone, Brian here. We got this story off of r/MrRipper, so head on over there if you want to submit your story to us, either in a pre-existing thread or a thread that you make yourself. With that out of the way, let's begin. This story is titled The Evilest Thing I've Done to a Player by the Darkest of the Links. Dun dun dun. Before I begin, I just want to say that as of posting this, I am 19 hours away from the conclusion to a 3-year-long campaign. That's a long campaign, man. Why is this important? Because this evil was the payoff of 3 years worth of planning, foreshadowing, and hinting, and it happened in the previous session. It began way back in the very first episode, involving the second NPC they'd ever met. So way back in the first session, I was still new at being a DM. This was my first long-running campaign, and I'd only DM'd a couple one-shots prior. I wanted to play it safe to start with, so naturally I had the players meet in a tavern. They were contracted by a shady guy to retrieve an important family heirloom that had been taken by some orcs in a camp not far away. The players were a half-elf bard named Fortuna, which also means luck if you didn't know that, a dragon-born rogue named Deve, and a fighter that sadly dropped out when the premise didn't interest them, so they were replaced by a human monk named Gwaki in session 2. Now, for this story, it's important to talk about Deve's backstory. He was arrested at a young age for a crime he didn't commit. He later learned his own father set him up to take the fall. He had only escaped the jail after spending a third of his life in there a week prior to the campaign's start. This was the first place with people he'd actually been at since escaping, and there was someone willing to hire him with no questions asked. So the NPC who gave the quest led them through a forest, following a compass enchanted with locate object, and they couldn't help but feel like they were being watched. None of them saw him until he was standing right next to them and cleared his throat. He seemed to be a human, a cleric of Tyr, with snow-white hair, a bushy mustache, and glasses as dark as the night they walked through. It was fairly clear that he was blind. He introduced himself as Royadel and explained that he overheard them and wanted to guide them on their quest as a holy man. They agreed, but under the condition that he doesn't get a piece of the reward. He agreed. The players managed to get to the orcs and persuade them to give them the box. I think they tricked them into thinking it was cursed. I can't remember the specifics. While the players went outside the cave to check the loot, Royadel stayed behind, offering to heal the orcs. When the players were out of eyesight, they heard a fight break out, but they didn't join in as the person who hired them opened the box to reveal an apple made out of solid ruby and radiating magical energy. Fortuna cast Detect Magic and found it is extremely powerful evocation. She also noticed that there were 3 groups of many magical items in the cave bouncing about, but couldn't focus on it too long as the NPC who hired them took a bite of the ruby apple. The players watched as the NPC bursted into flames, froze solid, and cackled with electrical energy as raw evocation ran through his body, violently killing him. They quickly put the apple back in the box and slammed it shut. About this time, Royadel walked out of the cave, wiping blood off his mace with his cloak. The players could see a flintlock and a dagger strapped to his side. He looked at the quest hook NPC's corpse and explained that is what he was trying to avent. He then removed his glasses and his form shimmered. No long was an elderly human standing there, but 3 pom-pups, a homebrew race of bipedal Pomeranian dogs. Standing on each other's shoulder. The top one with a scar across his milky eyes, the middle with scars on his ears, and the third with a scar over his mouth and missing a tongue. They reintroduced themselves as brothers: Roy the blind cleric of Tyr, Ed the deaf gunslinger, and Al the mute rogue. So the Pompup brothers brought the players to the organization they work for and explained that the apples are dangerous and they're trying to retrieve them. It's difficult because the tree also dispersed many fake apples too, such as the one the quest hook NPC ate. This is where the fighter dropped out and Gwaki came in. So the players loved the Pompups. They were the NPCs they interacted with the most. When they hit level 3, Deve started training under Al. You see, Al was an arcane trickster. Though he was mute, he was a great teacher. He and his brothers taught Deve to never trust anyone. After all, they weren't what they seemed to be when the players first met them. The game continued and the players retrieved some of the real apples. They even recruited some dragonborn brothers that they insisted on calling the Dragonborn Z. But they always came back to the Pomp-Ups whenever they could. After the third real apple, necromancy, I realized I'd been railroading pretty hard. To remedy this, I kickstarted Act 2 of this 3-act game. The demi-plane in which their hub was located got assaulted by the big bad evil guy. The players were forced to flee as the entire hub evacuated into the magical labyrinth that served as their fast travel system. The cleric of Istis, who had been sending them on their missions, gave them a box, and the only instructions were to get to Neverwinter and find the lady's handmaid. And then I dropped them on the other side of the continent. It took many sessions to get there. And who greeted them but the Pomp-Ups? The players were overjoyed when the Pomp-Ups explained some of the plot and answered some questions. They were so helpful. Good boys. Best of friends. Even if they did stay out of the fight that destroyed a third of Neverwinter. Ugh. They claimed it was PTSD because it was the second time they'd been in this very situation. They previously got the Abjuration apple, but lost it due to the players' actions. The same apple later caused the destruction of Neverwinter in the present. Eventually, the players got stuck in the past due to a wish in the past. They learned that some heroes of legend that ended a war between Fae and dragons that had been brought up a number of times throughout the campaign ended up being themselves. They had to go and get the alliance of the 4 Archfae of Seasons and 5 daughters of Tiamat, which Deve was a descendant of House Green. When they got to the Archfae of Spring's domain, the water had been poisoned and corrupted by the BBEG. The party went to its source to find a Cerberus poisoning it. This wasn't just a Cerberus. He introduced himself as Rhea, the Hound of the BBEG. During a valiant fight, the Cerberus taunted them, to which Gwaki responded by ripping out the tongue of one of the heads. Fortuna later cast Fireball with such high damage it boiled out the eyes of another head. Oh god. Deve stabbed into the ears of the third head. I see where this is going. The dog swore vengeance as his being melted into the dark abyssal ichor. The players made a comment about how they liked the parallels between the Cerberus and the Pomp-Ups. I told them I appreciate that, and this narrator knows all of your tricks. Now, we get into last Thursday. The players finally made it to the present. They knew what they were facing and what they needed to do. They wished for the power of Asgoroth divided evenly among them. Such a powerful wish granted them audience with Ao, the Overgod. He told them he will grant their request temporarily if they can first prove their worth, and sent them to fight 3 colossi that served as the main gimmick behind the prior bosses as well as the weapons the players used against the BBEG in the past arc. So the party was split, thousands of miles away from each other and facing the colossi alone, with only the NPCs that were in their respective towns at the time for help. Deve chose to go to Neverwinter and face the colossus known as the World. Now, earlier in the campaign, when they first went to Neverwinter, the World was unleashed by accident, rampaged, and then stolen by an antagonist known as the Usurper King of Dragons. This time, Neverwinter was prepared for something like this, deep in a lab under Neverwinter University. A Mousefolk sage, a former PC played by Fortuna's player years ago, and a kobold named Dens had been using their many skills that had been shown throughout the campaign to create essentially a dragon-shaped Magitech mech, kind of like a divine beast from Breath of the Wild. Sage stayed on ground for support while Deve piloted it, and Dens ran maintenance on it. It was a massive battle in the heart of Neverwinter, and we played Calvin Ball with how it went using mostly percentiles. One really bad percentile on Deve's part resulted in the mech being disabled. The arcane core was about to go critical. He tried to go back for Dens, but it was too late. The delay costed Deve. He crashed to the ground, sans one wing. It was incinerated off by the blast of raw magic when the arcane core exploded. And what's worse, Dens didn't make it out. But when Deve looked up, he saw the smiling face of Al, extending a paw to help him up. Deve was overjoyed to have a friend in such a difficult battle. The Colossus was still rampaging, and there were several creatures of shadow running around causing havoc. He was glad at the very least he wasn't alone. As he hugged Al, I asked, "Deve, how much dice do you roll for a sneak attack?" 10d6. Why? Deve's player responded. I didn't answer. I just rolled 2d20 and took the higher of the two. Does a 31 hit? Of course it hit. I described how as he felt the warmth of his mentor in his arms, there was a sharp stabbing pain in his back. 43 points of damage. Looking down, he saw Al holding a bloody dagger. His brothers crawl out of the rubble and join him. Darkness starts to envelop the three. their forms blending together until standing in their place is the Cerberus, scarred from the last battle, but having been resurrected by the big bad evil guy. He had been working for the organization to sabotage it from the inside. It's how the BBEG was able to assault it at the end of the first third of the campaign. I made him fight the Pom-Pups. Sage joined in, the player was really excited to use the character again, but even victory was hollow, if you can call it that. Dave, in his anger, cut off the heads of Roy and Ed, and Sage cast a spell that blinded and deafened Al, forcing the scars of his fallen brothers onto him, before banishing him to whence he came, forever. So there, Dave stood, alone, betrayed by one of the few people he trusted, just as he was when he started the campaign. And to make matters worse, this was the only character to explicitly betray anyone. TLDR, I spent 3 years making the most adorable NPCs, one of which taught the rogue how to be an arcane trickster. After years of very subtle foreshadowing, the players betray the rogue and reveal themselves to be an enemy the players fought 1,000 years in the past. Rogue ended up emotionally being at the same place he was at the start of the campaign. Hey everyone, Brian here. Before we get into the business and positive talk, I wanted to read one comment on this story that sums up my thoughts. I just want to say, this is absolutely beautiful. It's so well done that I can't help but feel both the betrayal of the players and the sense of accomplishment you must feel. Bravo, bravo indeed. Good on you, Game Boy, for saying that one, because it's true. That said, man, that was a hell of a thing. It even tugged my heart at the end, if you can't tell. That said, if you did like the vid, and even shed a tear like I have, leave a like and a sub, especially if you're new here. Trust me, it helps us out. And make sure to check out MrRipper's Discord, Twitter, and sub r/MrRipper, all links in the description, and give him a follow there too, as well as sharing your stories. We always want to read them. To follow me personally, you can dive on my Discord, Twitter, and YouTube, Brian Vaughn VA, where I stream games and talk about the ins and outs of voice acting. And be sure to check out the MrRipper merch, as well as our faithful companions, Adventurers Coffee Company. They, like the three brothers in the story, have been with us for quite some time, quite loyally I might add too, and it would be a shame not to shout out their delicious, smoky, and, dare I say, earthy coffee known as Dungeons and Dark Roast, which comes in bean or ground forms. They're lovely people and they deliver high quality roast at a quality price. And using MrRipper at checkout also nets you 10% off, so it can't hurt to give them a try. With all of that out of the way, I just wanted to say that tonight, I hope everyone is doing well. So much is looming over our heads right now, and I want to make sure everyone knows that the world is going to be better. It's going in a great direction right now, even if it doesn't look like it is. Trust me, it is. Just take some time off social media. Don't watch anything, don't look at anything, just be safe, wear your mask, chill out at home, call your parents, call your friends, your favorite aunt or uncle, or even your grandpaps if they're still around. Spend some time with your children or your pets, or just chilling outside by yourself reading a book. Anything to get away from the world and focus on the one important thing, you. Fill your heart with love, let yourself heal, rest your weary souls. Life is about to get better, and you need to be ready for it. So take some time to yourself for me, alright? All the love, everyone. See you next time here on MrRipper, or some of you on my own channel, Brian Vaughn VA. Be safe, be happy, and have a good one.